the approved requirements, as it says, again, I mean, to be honest, it's they're all flowing logically, isn't it? So you have some, you need to maintain the traceability of the requirements. So you've got the first one, tracing requirements. Then you need to have the requirements management or maintenance, which is again overall set of activity that you do all the way through. Then assessment of the requirement change, if you have got, and then you prioritize the requirement, and you've got to approve the requirement. If they've got any kind of changes, you need to approve or take a decision on that. So it's all, they're all interrelated, isn't it? So I would like to bring that kind of cohesion in this set of knowledge area for this one. So when you talk about inputs, again, requirements, verified requirements, and then designs. Obviously, by this time you've got verified because you checked with the stakeholders, you've got some requirement analysis done, you've got the prioritization done, you've got all of those done in terms of the impact analysis that the requirement change, the proposed change is going to impact on the solution. So then you have to consider the approval of that. So again, you need to look at, if you want to approve that, you need to look at overall, again, the STOP thing, right? The strategic, tactical, operational aspect of it, the vision, the mission, and the objectives, and the overall project plan, and the roadmap of where we are, the governance approach, again, the change control boards come in, the architecture of the requirements, all of these are related. So I'm not going to repeat it again. So you know that it's going to have an impact on the solution scope and how that's going to affect the overall solution in terms of the technology, in terms of features. Is it going to have a significant impact on the architecture, whether it has got a database? Is it going to affect the data? Is it going to affect the middleware, the front end? Is the design going to be just the kind of design, visual design? So whatever it is, sometimes, for example, if you've developed a product and you've created a prototype of that product, and it's actually shown to the users, you just create some mock-ups. You don't really give too much attention to perhaps how it looks like, or how the fonts and the colors and things like that. But where you wanted to go live, then you've got this kind of suddenly, hey, you know what? We need to apply the organizational standard. It doesn't have the standard look. We need to have the organizational standards. You need to follow the user interface guidelines. You need to have the visual design guidelines. You need to have the branding of the company. You need to have the logo in the right way. We need to have the proper colors, not using the Molburon font, which is the organizational font, accepted font for the regular text. You need to do you have got to have the copyrights and the internal privacy policy there in the bottom. All of these come in, right? So we need to look at all of these. Well, these are not really significant when it comes to the functionality, but then when you really want to go live and put this product into production, you need to be aware of these. These are significant changes. These are important and urgent as well, with respect to whether you've got 10 days or you've got 1 day to go live. You still have to do all these, and without these you cannot just go on, because your product would look too messy, too buggy. It looks too superficial, and too much of typos and too many different fonts being used. All that, what would that convey? It would convey a trust deficit. People would not trust you because you didn't take care of these. Too many lowercase, uppercase fonts here and there. The font, 10 different fonts being used. The colors are not really matching. You used 15 different colors on the same page, 10 different font families. The hierarchy of the fonts is not followed. You have got a small font on the top, and then bottom you've got a big font, and there's no copyright. You've not have no privacy policy, no branding, no logo anywhere, no intellectual property related information. It looks like a shoddy job done by one person, and instead of the appeal of a corporate product or an application. So that's a significant piece of work, even though it is not something that you can just brush off on. That is not required. You cannot do that if it is going to be going live in front of thousands and millions of people. So that again is going to significantly impact your scope of solution. It's not functional though, but that's fine, but still non-functional. It still is about the work that you need to do on the product. So that's where you're talking about the approval requirements. And then what is the purpose of this? So you need to obtain the agreement of client on requirements and design, right? Client as in the customers, the end users, or whatever, or the business team, so that you can continue with the business analysis. That's important. So you get the approval, you get the sign off. Yes, you can go ahead. and the solution implementation can progress further once you just get the business analysis activities sign off. Then following from there, you'll then get more and more requirements, and once you get the requirements all in one place and well maintained, then that gives the go ahead for the architecture. Once the architecture is in place, the design will go on. Once the design isn't done, then you can follow with the development, and then once the development is done, then it get pushed into the testing environment. The testers would have a go at the build, and then they come up with the testing results, and everything else is in place. Then it goes into the production. So everything is actually kind of interlinked that way. So what does this mean in terms of approval of requirement? It means that we as BAs need to collaborate with the stakeholders. First thing is to gain consensus on the new requirements. It could be new, totally new requirement that has not been touched so far, that has not been worked on so far, or it could be the change to an existing requirement like we discussed this before. And then we need to communicate the outcome of discussions. What is it that we decide? Is it a go or is it a no-go? Are we going to accept the change? Are we going to incorporate that new requirement to the scope of the new build, or are we going to drop it off? So what is the final result of the discussions and the decision? What was the decision that came out, right? And then once you have that, then how are we going to manage that? Manage in terms of mentioning that this particular requirement was because of the discussion with the sponsors. This is because of the feedback from the customer. This is because of the survey that we did with the end users, and they've asked us to include this functionality into this build. So this came up with this. So there's a rationale. There is a reason why you have got some requirement into the backlog. So again, that's why we were talking about the traceability of the requirements going not just from the requirements, but also above the requirements. So where does that requirement come from? What is the source of that? Who or what gave that requirement, right? So, and then the approval process in terms could be, again, formal, or they could be informal in terms of the approach. So one is obviously in terms of the predictive or the waterfall kind of traditional approaches. They're more in terms of at the end of the phase or at the end of development, you do this, or at the end of the project life cycle, you can have some approvals in place. But then when it comes to agile, basically that's done pretty much in an informal way. So approved only when construction implementation solution. So basically, if you're talking about a product being designed or developed, at that stage itself, you can perhaps take a decision. You don't have to wait till the end of the release or end of the life cycle of the product. So that's the reason why we go agile, right? So we can take decisions quickly and then be able to implement them and then release the product, get the feedback on the product or the feature from the customers, end users, and again, make the changes and then take decisions. That cycle, right? So continuous development, continuous integration, continuous improvement. So you're actually taking that iterative and incremental development of the product in a way which is progressive. It's not done once, it's not done at the end of the project, but it's actually done all the way through. So the feedback cycle, the kind of change, the decision making, the prioritization happens pretty much every day and every week and every sprint and every release of your agile development. That's why it is so, in the context of if you've got a project or a process or a product which has got a lot of potential changes that happen to that in that industry or domain, then it's better to go with agile and adaptive approaches, because you've got that sense of you cannot predict what could come next year. So you just go in the flow, and if you've got changes being thrown at you, just grab them, catch them, and then study the changes, analyze the changes, assess them, and then accept or reject the change and move on. So it is pretty much like how you face like in a cricket, how you face the balls. The batsman keeps facing the balls and then the nets, and then they get to improve their technique. So it's pretty much the same way. You keep getting those changes in the form of these balls, and then you need to either deflect, or you need to divert, you need to hit the ball, depending on how you see the ball as. The same thing with the change. If you see the change as positive, it's important, it's going to help increase the business value of that particular product, you take it, you accept the change. Otherwise, you're just going to ignore the change and you're going to drop it off. So it's pretty much very